Make up mine. Fight.
This may be a controversial take, but I think it goes without saying that pretty much every weapon and playstyle in TF2 requires skill to some extent. Even the most ideologically brain-dead strategies still ask for some degree of game sense, positioning, matchup knowledge, and timing from the player. Every strategy can fail if performed improperly, and virtually every strategy can flourish if used in the right hands. However, I think it also goes without saying that some TF2 weapons require a bit more mechanical execution than others. In some cases, certain weapons are balanced entirely around these high skill requirements. Weapons that ask for a higher level of technical execution as a base foundational element of their designs. In this video, I want to talk about some of these. These are 4 TF2 items that are explicitly balanced around their high skill minimums. Weapons that, in the hands of a hypothetical perfect player, someone who never misses and never misplays, would be objective upgrades to stock. However, the large amount of mechanical skill necessary to use them consistently keeps them in check under normal conditions. A new or bad player using these weapons will not get the most out of them. I want to stress that I'm aware that any weapon in the game could hypothetically qualify for this. Any weapon would obviously be broken with perfect play or bad with mediocre play, but these are just 4 weapons that I perceive to epitomize this design philosophy the most. That said, let's roll.
Yaks.
Oh god, the crows.
Come here, sweetheart.
The direct hit is probably the poster child for this dynamic within TF2. It's a weapon that, in the hands of someone who never made mistakes and played optimally at every moment, would make it a theoretical direct upgrade to the stock rocket launcher. However, it's balanced out by having an extremely punishing single downside. A downside that makes the weapon pretty much as inaccessible as it gets to a prospective new player. At a base, the direct hit is an unlockable rocket launcher for Soldier with a whopping 3 upsides, and when you first see them, they're pretty damn appealing upsides. It deals more damage than the stock rocket launcher, its rockets travel significantly faster, and it deals guaranteed mini-crits to enemies knocked into the air by explosives, grapple hooks, or rocket packs. These 3 upsides are huge and some of the objective best that a TF2 weapon can have. Flat increased damage, a faster, easier to land projectile, and even more extra damage on top of that in a common situation. It can handily one-shot light classes, and with proper usage can easily 2-shot most power classes. What's not to like? Well, these incredibly appealing upsides of the direct hit are balanced out by a single, deceptively crushing negative that makes it a side grade in the purest sense of the word. A 70% smaller explosive radius. That means that this weapon only has 30% of the splash zone that a stock rocket launcher has, so while a stock rocket might hit an enemy from here, the direct hit will only hit enemies from here. I don't think it can be understated just how important splash damage is to Soldier's general game plan. Due to the speed and predictable trajectory of Soldier's rockets, a big part of playing the class effectively boils down to predicting where enemies will be and setting pseudo-traps using splash damage. If you shoot their feet, they will die. A lot of Soldier players will not exclusively rely on direct hits of the stock rocket launcher, as its slow projectile and generous splash radius make it much more consistent to line up splash hits for massive spread damage. And while a UGC god Soldier let every direct rocket with his medic GF's beam shove firmly betwixt his cheeks, most players are not these Soldiers. The direct hit poises to significantly lower the Soldier's bubble of influence as a class in exchange for more damage with tight precision, sacrificing the consistent safety of splash hits for more devastating damage that's harder to consistently pull off. While you can still go for splash hits, you'll find that the radius is so small you've basically got to be hitting right underneath enemies' feet to land damage, and at that point you might as well just be...
Oh, fuck!
Yeah. On top of that, the faster projectile speed is both a blessing and a curse, as it makes lining up direct hits slightly easier, but also changes the timing just enough from the stock rocket launcher to really throw things off upon first switching. When you get into the groove with the direct hit though, things can really get moving, and you'll quickly find yourself spamming out choke points, diving medics, and just erasing light classes with a consistency and ease that no other weapon in the game can really accomplish. It's a tantalizing weapon that promises big rewards to people who can tame it, but only brings crushing disappointment to those who can't. Because for all those big damage, close range rocket connects and those one-shot mini-sentries and those sleek air shots, the direct hit is still a weapon that'll chew you up and spit you out if you can't acclimate to it. There will be times where you beef all of your rockets, there will be times where you can't pin down the enemy, and there will be times where you just can't land a direct hit. And that's what keeps this weapon from being a direct upgrade. It's incredibly powerful, but narrows the margin for error so much that it basically mandates near perfect play consistently to use efficiently. We can all meme about getting lucky and deleting scouts and snipers at close range, but all of those ill-fated mid-range encounters are truly what define this weapon. You've got to land direct hits to use it effectively, and it's simply not realistic to do that every time. Overall, the direct hit may very well be the poster child for a skill-dependent TF2 weapon, and the first one we're discussing in this video for a reason. It's got an incredibly strong set of upsides, and a downside that may seem innocuous at first, but will absolutely break your back and humble you if you use it before you're ready. Also, remember that this is an achievement item on the game's recommended beginner class. That is a sick joke on Valve's part.
With my apologies.
We're going to be deviating from the conventional class order a bit and talking about the Spy next. The Spy has a few weapons that sacrifice the class's personal survivability for powerful upsides, between the Latrange dealing lower damage in exchange for a longer cloak, the Big Earner slightly lowering his health for speedy backstabs, and in the case of the one we'll be talking about in this video, making the Spy both the frailest and tankiest class in the game at once, so long as you're able to consistently make plays. The Conniver's Kunai. Now, I know having the kunai in this video at all is going to be a bit controversial, as there are certain portions of the TF2 community who view this weapon as borderline brain dead and over-centralizing the Spy as a class. However, as a heavy main who's frequently on the receiving end of this weapon, I thoroughly believe that the negative base this weapon starts the player at can easily make it among the most newcomer-unfriendly weapons in the game. The Conniver's Kunai is a knife for Spy that makes him start each life at an enormous 70 HP. This is the lowest base health that a class can naturally be at any point in the entire game, and puts the Spy in one-shot range of pretty much every form of burst damage in the entire game. I think it goes without saying how massive of a downside this is, as a Spy without proper game sense or situational awareness or just bad loadout synergy can be capital F fucked before they can get a chance to make a move using this thing. The kunai requires a clean mix of carefully picking your battles and hyper backstab offense in those battles to use effectively. And how were you rewarded for performing this balancing act?
The candles just keep moving.
Soldier, need help!
He's really just leaving me here. He gave me his energy and left me. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should change. Maybe this is my second and last chance. Maybe I was wrong. Nah.
Gentlemen?
Pretty damn handsomely, I'd say. Backstabbing an enemy with the Conniver's Kunai allows the Spy to sap their health, gaining a maximum of around 210 health of overheal. A Kunai backstab also immediately cleanses the Spy of most negative damage dealing status effects like Afterburn or Bleed. This allows a single well-timed Kunai stab to make the Spy the literal second tankiest class in the game, immediately empower himself to tough out or escape a tricky situation, and chain together incredibly tanky stabs that make him nigh unkillable. Combining the Kunai with the Dead Ringer and a strong revolver can make the Spy an extremely potent force in terms of both dealing damage and tanking, and it can be a true ordeal to put one down once they get rolling. The sheer difference between a kunai Spy fresh out of spawn and a kunai Spy after a single backstab is pretty staggering, coupled with the fact that all it takes is that single backstab for a kunai Spy to completely undo any damage or debuffs you've done to him, and you've got a recipe for a Frenchman that's hard to put down. It's all around an extremely powerful and tough to surmount unlock in the right hands, and a no-brainer for a Spy player worth their salt. Notice how I said in the right hands and worth their salt though, as for all of the crazy chain stabs and game-winning disruptions you're capable of performing with this knife, you're still beginning each fight with close to half of your standard health, and are extremely susceptible to being killed by a wayward attack before you can even begin to make your move. The amount of clueless, fresh install Spies who find this weapon through random drop are enraptured by its design and reputation, and immediately think that equipping it'll make them Spy main gods, only to be thoroughly and decisively mollywopped by everyone on the enemy team before they can get a backstab, is staggering. In the hands of an experienced player, this knife is borderline broken, but in the vast majority of cases for less experienced players, they'll never get to experience this weapon's true upsides. The fact of the matter is that, despite this weapon being extremely powerful and handily outperforming a lot of Spy's other options if used well, it's still a knife that requires keen game sense, loadout synergy, and the ability to attack opportunistically to use effectively. You literally have the lowest base health under the game's normal rules, and you have to land at least one backstab before those crazy rolls can begin. This alone keeps the kunai from being an entirely over-centralizing best-in-slot pick. While you could definitely argue that it is that, there are players who will be unable to fully capitalize on its strength, and there will be times where the circumstances of the match do not favor using the kunai. 70 health is very easy to lose in TF2. Keep in mind that a default heavy has more than 4 times as much HP as you do when you equip this thing. You can get tanky, but you have to be able to put in the work to reach that point. The kunai is such an interesting weapon to me because the way the TF2 community talks about it, you'd think it was nigh unbeatable. Like, this thing single-handedly makes Spy the strongest class in the game. But the fact of the matter is that a 55% max health decrease is still an enormous barrier to entry for a new player, or even an experienced one who's used to using other knives. That just speaks to the strength of health on kill though. If you can secure those picks, more are likely to come.
Start praying, boy.
Engineer isn't famous for being a particularly execution-heavy class. That's not to say that he doesn't require skill, far from it. However, the skills that go into high-level engineer play tend to be a bit different than high-level play with other classes. It's resource management, risk assessment, map knowledge, knowing when and where to place buildings, knowing when to get out of there, stuff like that makes the engineer an especially skill-based class. And while the basic principles of aiming your gun and fighting enemies still apply, he's largely a multitasker whose job it is to facilitate the entire rest of the team's effort on his own over participating in one-on-one gunfights. And then there's the Widowmaker. This is a gun that poises to turn Engineer into a high-execution, high-risk gunfighter that his Texan blood bore him to be. It's a gun that somehow runs directly in opposition to the Engineer's base function as a class, yet is somehow also incredibly functional and fun in the right hands. And unlike the Overwatch hero who it shares its name with, it's never had to receive a nerf. So what makes the Widowmaker tick, and why is it such a standout weapon in Engineer's lineup? Well, it's a shotgun that has the same amount of damage, the same rate of fire, and the same amount of pellets as the stock shotgun. It can also fire a total of 6 missed shots before being spent, which also aligns it with Engineer stock. While it may sound like a simple reskin, you might have noticed that I said the word miss, and that's because the Widowmaker has no ammo, and instead draws from the Engineer's metal supply as a source of determining how many shots it can fire. Each shot fired takes 30 metal, again allowing it a maximum of 6 missed shots, but the kicker is that the gun restores exactly 1 point of metal for each point of damage done, and with a maximum ramp-up damage of 90, you can potentially get back more than double the metal you spend with each shot. In addition, the gun never needs to reload so long as you have metal, so with true aim at a close enough distance, you can theoretically hammer away enemies until there's none left to shoot at. This all around makes the Widowmaker a frightening close-range damage dealer within the Engineer's lineup that facilitates an extremely aggressive battle engineer playstyle. It also has a stat that allows you to deal 10% extra damage to enemies being targeted by your sentry, which makes it a pretty transparent attempt to encourage engineers to have sentries up alongside this weapon. And that's the thing. The Widowmaker, by its very nature, exists contrary to Engineer's base role as a class. The metal you're supposed to use to build helpful dispensers and teleporters for your team is instead used to damage enemies, and can lead to both you and your team finding yourselves in some unfavorable positions. On top of that, if you can't hit your shots, or struggle to find enemies entering your bubble of influence often enough to shoot, then it's pretty much a waste to equip this weapon. It's designed explicitly and wholly to shoot enemies, and is not designed to work around Engineer's buildings, which is a unique trait amongst Engineer's weapons. This ultimately leads to a weapon that one could argue encourages extremely selfish engineer play. It's a gun that spends the Engineer's main class-specific resource on something other than helping his team, yet has the potential to output insane damage if used well. And while the tone of my commentary up to this point might seem to have skewed negative, I am speaking in earnest sincerity here when I say that this is one of my favorite guns in the game. Because to me, the Widowmaker is not just about mindlessly hammering away at enemies while neglecting your buildings. If you use this thing to facilitate the building playstyle, it can be an extremely potent backup tool to get your engineer ball rolling. If enemies get a bit too close, if you see a pesky power class encroaching on your turf, or if you're low on metal in a pinch, a few well-placed shots of the Widowmaker can fix all of those problems instantly. It's an alarmingly powerful tool that's genuinely useful for more than the selfishly playing battle engineer. All of that obviously hinges, though, on being able to hit your shots, and that, alongside knowing when, why, and where to equip this weapon, is what lands it in this video. The Widowmaker is interesting because despite the direct hit being the poster child, I'd say this is the purest definition of a skill-dependent unlock in the game. Its true colors only come out when you either miss or hit all of your shots. The only thing it offers with perfect play is being able to fire more and restoring a bit of metal, and the only thing you lose by missing your shots is not being able to fire anymore. If you rest anywhere in the middle ground between hitting some shots and missing others, then you probably won't notice too much of a difference between this and stock. but those golden moments where you're landing all of your shots, just hammering away at the enemy with infinite bullets and they can't get a shot off because you're not relenting, are some of the most fun moments you can have as Engineer. With the right setup, the Widowmaker can be one of the most potent offensive tools in TF2, and yet, even with the worst setup, it's still just a variation of the stock shotgun. You're usually not handicapping yourself by equipping this weapon so long as you can land some bullets. It's all around a weapon that rewards using it in the right circumstances, landing your shots consistently, and knowing when to hold back with your buildings versus when to go on the offensive. I realize that my script has been all over the place during this section, and that's just because the Widowmaker is one of the most uniquely designed weapons in the game. It doesn't have a super class-defining upside or a wholly unique downside. It's an entirely skill-dependent unlock that only hits its full potential if you can land most or all of your shots. It's such a unique weapon within TF2's lineup, and one that I think more people should give an earnest whirl.
All your heads look bloody 12 feet tall.
And lastly, we have Sniper's answer to a skill check unlocked, this time being the Bizarre Bargain. This weapon is interesting as an entry for this video because it's also a snowball weapon. These are weapons that start out in an objectively worse position than other weapons in the game, but become progressively stronger as you get kills and play well with them. They follow the fundamental principle of when the ball starts rolling, it'll continue rolling. And while TF2 has plenty of snowball weapons, none of them really have as much overlap between the snowball mechanic and the criteria for this video as the Bizarre Bargain. But why is that? Well, for starters, because it's one of the best weapons in the game. More so than any other weapon on this list, the Bizarre Bargain is truly a weapon that handily outclasses the stock sniper rifle when used by an experienced, skilled player. A competent sniper using this weapon can easily shut down an entire lobby, and it's a very popular choice amongst dedicated sniper mains and less honest players. Its stats are very simple. It starts out with a significantly slower scope charging time than snipers' other rifles, but steadily increases its charge time as you get headshot kills. This eventually reaches a point where you'll be firing fully charged scope headshots in a little over a second after each one, which allows you to output some insane damage and area control. A sniper who can stay alive, land headshots consistently, can easily become one of the most powerful forces on the map with this weapon in tow. It only takes 3 headshots to start seeing an increase over the stock sniper rifle, and afterwards you can really start feeling this thing snowball. Dropping heavies and soldiers in less than 2 seconds is nothing to sneeze at, and the ease with which it can vaporize light classes is simply absurd. It's an all-around, incredibly powerful, damn near over-centralizing tool for a skilled and consistent sniper. But that really only applies to a skilled sniper, and I can say this because I am not one. This is the only weapon on this list where I can speak from genuine experience towards its nature as a skill-dependent weapon, because the requirement of landing 3 or more headshots in a single life and then staying alive long enough to carry that momentum forward is something that I rarely get to experience. I'm just not good at clicking on those heads. I'll either miss all of my shots or die after only landing 1 or 2. And if I'm someone who struggles to get the most out of this weapon, then I'm certain that I'm not the only one. And I think that speaks to the larger balancing act going on with the Bizarre Bargain. The reason you don't see every sniper or even cheater running it is because it does require a bit of investment and the ability to consistently perform well to get the most out of it. One errant mistake can cause your 7-head streak you've carefully built up to be lost instantly, and the skill floor requirement of being able to land multiple headshots in a single life that not every player will be able to acclimate to. Compared to the consistent safety of stock, the more forgiving bonuses of the Heatmaker, and the insane damage of the Machina, the Bizarre Bargain simply has a higher skill floor and a smaller margin of error to gain its primary bonuses. The Bizarre Bargain is probably the most transparent example of a weapon that's inaccessible to lesser skilled or new players in this video. Even more so than the direct hit kunai or Widowmaker, it's a weapon that rewards getting kills with more kills, yet punishes the inability to reliably contribute to a fight with a negative that makes it a direct downgrade from stock without a bit of investment. If you're not landing 3 or more headshots per life, then you're wasting time using the Bizarre Bargain. But if you're clicking on those heads and securing those picks, then there's very little that can stop you. So, where does that leave us? Well, I think I've developed a clearer understanding of the design mentality behind these weapons. They're often beginner traps, either tantalizing the player with really cool appealing upsides and designs, and then swiftly punishing them for not being able to use them well, or presenting seemingly innocuous upsides that new players won't immediately see the value in. These are weapons that require knowledge of the game and an understanding of both what makes them so strong and how to use them to get the most out of. Not every weapon has to be beginner friendly, and it's okay for something to require added adaptation and practice from the player. These are weapons that, in the hands of a new player, may seem bad, but once everything clicks, you enter that flow state and you start securing kills, you'll never want to put them down. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was really fun to make and really got me to use some weapons I don't generally tend to go for, so I hope you enjoyed. Have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks and cheers.